All right, Chapter 9, Sexual Reproduction and Meiosis. This should be a fairly rapid chapter. Reproduction can occur in a couple different ways, asexually or sexually. There are advantages to both. Asexual reproduction is a way to increase extremely rapidly. In that, basically, an organism replicates its DNA, splits the contents of one cell into two. This would be like bacteria, amoeba, any of the protists, and even some more advanced animals like Hydra, which just bud off and clone themselves. So in asexual reproduction, it doesn't take as much energy. For instance, some bacteria have a life cycle of about 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes they double, which means you get 48 generations in a 24-hour day. Okay. In sexual reproduction, you get the advantage to sexual reproduction is you get more genetic variability in the offspring. Okay. Increasing genetic variability and increasing the odds of getting new combinations of genetics when two people reproduce together increases the ability of the species to survive and adapt to changing environments. Why sex? Well, the female parent contributes an egg, the male produces a sperm. Each one of these cells has only half the number of DNA that a normal cell has. And so humans, for example, have got 23 pairs of chromosomes. In an offspring, each pair of chromosomes, one of the chromosomes comes from the mom and one comes from the dad. It's expensive, though. Attracting a mate, producing sex cells are costly. And generally, the more intelligent the offspring is, the longer it takes for them to develop and the longer it takes for the parents to invest in raising them to where they can then survive on their own. Now, in asexual reproduction, the downside of that is that even though you can produce huge numbers, there isn't a whole lot of genetic variability. And so when you're cloning yourself, you're not expanding the gene pool. So it's easier to be wiped out by something. If something is bad enough to kill one of a bacterium, chances are it's going to be bad enough to kill all of them. The opposite of that in humans, because we have a larger gene pool and more variability in individuals in their genetic makeup, it's less likely that a disease or pathogen would wipe us all out. Some of us would be able to survive. Now, most cells in a sexually reproducing organism have two sets of chromosomes, one from the father and one from the mother. And so if we're looking here at these different pairs of chromosomes, one will be from mom and one will be from dad. Okay? Now, diploid and haploid. Diploid cells are full cells. A skin cell is diploid. It has 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. It has a full complement of the DNA. A haploid cell only has half the number of chromosomes in it. So it's only got half of the DNA that the adult organism would need to survive. The numbered chromosomes, 1 through 22, are called autosomes. These chromosomes are the same for both sexes. And then we have the sex chromosomes, noted by an X and a Y. The X is a chromosome to produce a female. The Y produces the male. And if you look here, you can see the X chromosome is a full chromosome, while the Y is a little tiny chromosome. And this is where sex-linked traits can occur. If you have something like male pattern baldness down here, at the bottom of this chromosome, there isn't a corresponding gene on the other chromosome to mask it. So recessive traits on the majority of the X chromosome can be expressed with just a single allele. Here's a homologous pair. Now this is before they're divided. Okay, so this would be in a cell getting ready to undergo either mitosis or meiosis. These show the alleles. And so the purpose of making meiosis, of making these sex cells, is they take and basically first they reproduce all of their chromosomes like you would see in chapter 7 and 8, replication. Then they get pulled apart and sorted twice. This allows that basically each sex cell, whether it be an egg or a sperm, will only have one chromosome for each trait. Since there's 46 chromosomes here in 23 pairs, then a sex cell would have 23 chromosomes, one from each pair. And that's what a homologous pair is. So if we look here, the number 1 chromosome, you can't match the number 1 chromosome to the number 2 chromosome. So they always line up the same way. So all the number 1 chromosome from the dad and the number 1 chromosome from the mom always end up together. Okay? A haploid cell has one set of chromosomes, like I said, and when two haploid cells come together, they form a zygote. And the only haploid cells that humans ever produce are either eggs or sperm. And meiosis only occurs to produce the eggs and sperm. Mitosis is the way that we get all the other cells. Okay? So these specialized diploid cells are called germ cells, and they arrive through a process called meiosis. Now, we've already looked at mitosis, all right, in previous chapters, so you can refer to that if you want to see it, but we will go over meiosis here. I'm also going to link a little video of a meiotic division, so you can kind of see how it works. Now, in meiosis, you replicate once, but the nucleus divides twice. In mitosis, you replicate once and divide once. So in mitosis, you produce cells that instead of 46 chromosomes, have 92. And so when you split that cell into two, each cell will have 46 chromosomes. In a sex cell, the first time you start with, once you've replicated your DNA, you've got 92 chromosomes. And then you split them in the first phase, but that's not the end. Then you divide them a second time, called meiosis 2, and that's when you get the sex cells that are haploid. Okay. And they have the same, basically we have meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. They have the same 4 phases: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Telophase, you'll notice, you can always tell a telophase is they will have these little cleavage furrows where they're about to split. In anaphase, you'll see the 2 pairs of chromosomes being pulled apart, or the pair of chromosomes being pulled apart. Metaphase, they line up on the plate. And then in prophase, basically the nucleus, the nuclear envelope disappears and the chromosomes form. They take all the DNA strands that are spread out for use in the nucleus to produce proteins through translation and transcription, and concentrate them again into chromosomes that are tightly wound around nucleosomes. Here's metaphase 2. Now at the end of metaphase 1, at the end of meiosis 1, you basically will have two cells. So we start with 92 chromosomes. By the end of meiosis 1, you have 46, and then they split again, and you would have 23 in humans. In this one here, they've only got a few chromosomes. It's a little easier to understand that way. Gametes produced in meiosis are different from one another because of crossing over and independent assortment. So sometimes you generate new types of chromosomes because during the process of meiosis, they'll twist up and they'll break off and reattach. And so here we started with this pair of homologous chromosomes, but before they were pulled apart in meiosis 1, they got twisted up, and a chunk of this chromosome broke off and attached to the blue chromosome, and a chunk of the blue chromosome attached, swapped places with this purple chromosome. You now have two chromosomes that are unique from both parents. Neither parent will have this type of chromosome, and so that is an additional type of mixing and an additional type of producing unique chromosomes that increases genetic variability. Oops. It's called crossing over. Independent assortment. Basically, if you split during meiosis this 3 pairs of homologous chromosomes, okay, there are many, many ways in which you can get different types of mixes. Okay, because these chromosomes will split, and ultimately you will get, let me see, there would be, there are basically 8 different combinations of these types of chromosomes in the final sex cells that are produced. So we start with this cell, and it's going to undergo, by the time it finishes meiosis 2, it's only going to have 1 chromosome from each pair. So it'll look like this. This is going to be either an egg or a sperm. And there are 8 possible combinations. It's just 2 to the nth power. So the nth power stands for the number of pairs of chromosomes. So this has 3 chromosomes. So 2 times 2 times 2, 2 to the 3rd power. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. There are 8 possible combinations of these 6 chromosomes that could end up as a sperm or an egg. And there you go. There's the math. Now, if you put 2 to the 23rd power, that will give you the possible combinations of your chromosomes in an egg cell or a sperm cell, depending on whether you're male or female. Meiosis generates variability. So the meiosis generates a lot of variability, but there are some other little problems that can occur. Here, a sperm and an egg form a zygote, and while still an embryo, they split. The zygote splits into 2 embryos, and that's how you get identical twins. Okay, they have the exact same DNA. This zygote, instead of just becoming an embryo, replicates once and then produces 2 new zygotes that then become embryos. Fraternal twins is a little different. To get fraternal twins, you basically have 2 eggs that are fertilized. And so they are 2 separate embryos. They don't share any genetic material like identical twins do. Comparing mitosis and meiosis, interphase and prophase 1 and prophase are almost identical, but notice in metaphase they change. Okay, and mitosis only goes through 1 iteration. By the end of meiosis 1, okay, we are looking a little different here, and at the end of meiosis 2, you're basically these are your haploid cells. Mitosis produces 2 identical diploid cells from the original. Meiosis produces 4 haploid cells from the original. And again, I'm going to put a couple little films I made on mitosis and meiosis that you can review to watch this actually occur and talk you through every stage. Okay, errors in meiosis can occur. Sometimes you'll get what is called trisomy. They won't split properly, and you'll get an extra chromosome where there should only be 2. And having 3 chromosomes can cause several maladies. Okay. Individuals with missing chromosomes often cease developing, and basically they will just abort naturally, and you may never even have known that you were pregnant. Okay, if you get an extra chromosome, it doesn't usually cause automatic abortion of the embryo, and sometimes you can carry it to term, but a very common one of trisomy 21 are the Down syndrome. Okay. In the sex chromosomes, there are several combinations. These are just 4 of a few of them. Females normally have 2 X chromosomes. Males have an X and a Y. But some of these other things occur. 3 X chromosomes, 2 X's and a Y, an X and 2 Ys. And these can have effects. This is how we get things like hermaphrodites, who are born with both male and female genitalia. There's also a syndrome in which you just have embryonic fold where your genitalia should be, and you never develop either male or female genitalia. Okay. Now, plants have another thing to contend with that animals don't. It's called polyploidy, and it can actually produce new species. So, and this will often happen. Usually, it doesn't happen so much normally as with introduced plants. So if you bring 2 very closely related plants together and they cross-fertilize, you'll get a plant that has more chromosomes than the other 2. Basically, it'll add up it'll take the ones from the one species and ones from the other, and it will have a total that equals the number of chromosomes in both of these. Okay, and in that case, it becomes tetraploidy or polyploidy. This just means when the plant has more chromosomes than its ancestry, and it usually comes because of some hybridization event. Okay. Here is your list of vocabulary. That wraps up Chapter 9.